Before Junho could answer, every alarm on the ship began blaring at once. The observation deck's emergency shutters started to close. But not before Sa-young saw something that made her scream. A massive shadow had fallen across the stars. Through the closing shutters, tentacles thicker than subway trains were reaching toward their ship. The biomechanical appendages moved with terrifying intelligence, probing the new dawn's hull like a predator examining its prey. "All hands, this is Captain Yoon," came the announcement over the ship's speakers. "We have made contact with the hostile entity. All passengers report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill." The ship shuddered violently as something wrapped around its outer hull. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the emergency shelters built into the ship's core. Junho scooped up So-young and joined the crowd rushing through the corridors. "Appa, what's happening?" So-young asked, clinging to his neck. "Remember how we talked about the big creature that was chasing us?" Junho said, trying to keep his voice calm. "It found us. But the ship is very strong, and Captain Yoon knows what to do." The lights went out completely, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in hellish red. Through the ship's hull, they could hear a sound like metal being torn apart. Dr. Yunji met them at the emergency shelter entrance. "The medical bay is ready for casualties," she said quietly to her husband. "But Junho, the readings I'm seeing, this creature is unlike anything in our databases." Families huddled together in the reinforced shelters as the ship continued to shake. Children cried while parents whispered prayers in dozens of languages. The new dawn had been built to withstand asteroid impacts and cosmic radiation, but it was never designed to fight off a living weapon the size of a small moon. Hull breach in Section 7 announced the ship's AI, sealing emergency bulkheads. All personnel evacuate affected areas immediately. Through the shelter's reinforced windows, they could see crew members in spacesuits working frantically. To repair the damage, everyone knew the truth. If Korath wanted to destroy them, nothing would stop it. Sa-young looked up at her parents with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. "Why is the creature so angry?" "Maybe it's just scared like we are?" Her innocent question echoed in the minds of everyone who heard it, not knowing that those words would soon change everything. The emergency shelters reinforced. Doors buckled inward with a screech of twisted metal. Through the gaps, smaller versions of Korath began pouring into the ship's corridors like a nightmare tide. These biomechanical spawn were the size of large dogs, but moved with the fluid grace of predators. Their bodies gleamed with organic metal plating, and their multiple eyes glowed with the same sickly green light as their parent creature. "They're inside the ship," screamed Chief Security Officer Wu Jinhan over the intercom. "All security teams to Deck 7. Passengers, stay in your shelters." The creatures moved through the new dawn's corridors with terrifying intelligence. They didn't destroy everything in their path like mindless beasts. Instead, they seemed to be searching for something specific, their sensor organs twitching. As they sampled the air for chemical signatures, in the main emergency shelter, Dr. Junho Park held his wife and daughter close as the sounds of chaos echoed through the ship. Metal rang against metal as the security teams engaged the invaders with plasma rifles and energy weapons. But the bioform's adaptive armor made them nearly impossible to kill. "The creatures are learning our weapon patterns," reported Lieutenant Minasu Kim from the bridge. "Every shot we fire, they adapt to counter it." "Sir, we're losing ground on every deck." Captain Dong Han-yoon watched his tactical display with growing horror. The bioforms weren't just invading randomly. They were systematically isolating groups of passengers, studying them, analyzing their biological signatures. It was like watching a predator that had evolved beyond simple hunting into something far more sophisticated. "Papa, I need to use the bathroom," So-young whispered to her father during a brief lull in the fighting. "Not now," little star Junho said, pulling her closer. "It's too dangerous." But So-young was 8 years old, and nature couldn't wait for alien invasions. When her parents were distracted by a particularly loud explosion nearby, she slipped away from their embrace and crawled toward the shelter's emergency exit. The corridors outside were dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. Saw Young had explored these passages many times during the journey, playing hide-and-seek with other children. She knew exactly where the nearest bathroom was located. She was halfway there when the wall beside her exploded. The blast threw her small body against the opposite wall, her ears ringing from the impact. Through the smoke and debris, something massive began pushing through the breach. It wasn't one of the smaller bioforms. This was a piece of Korath itself, a living extension of the creature's main body. The thing that emerged defied every natural law So Young had ever learned. It was as tall as 3 grown men, its form constantly shifting between organic tissue and alien machinery. Cables and tentacles writhed around its bulk, sparking with electrical energy that seemed to pulse. In rhythm, with a massive eye positioned at its center, the eye was the most terrifying thing of all. It wasn't just an organ of sight, it was a window into an intelligence that had existed for millions of years, had consumed entire civilizations, and had never known anything but hunger and conquest. The pupil dilated as it focused on the small, human girl, and for a moment Saw Young felt the full weight of its ancient malevolence. She should have screamed. She should have run. Any rational person would have been frozen with terror at the sight of this living nightmare. But Saw Young had spent her entire young life around her father's research animals, and she recognized something in the creature's behavior that the adults had missed. The biomechanical horror was studying her. Just like Bada used to study new people he met. Its head tilted slightly, and the tentacles around its base shifted in what almost looked like uncertainty. Despite its terrifying appearance, the creature seemed confused. "You don't know what I am, do you?" So Young said softly, her voice barely audible over the distant sounds of battle. The massive eye blinked once, gesture so strangely familiar that it reminded her of her dog back home. Bada had looked at her the same way when she was trying to teach him new tricks. Alert, intelligent. Waiting for direction, Saw Young took a small step forward, remembering all the hours she had spent training Bada in their backyard. The key was confidence and consistency. Dogs could sense fear, and apparently so could ancient bioweapons. "Sit," she said firmly, using the same tone she had used with her pet. It was the voice of someone who expected to be obeyed, not because of anger or fear, but because of love and trust. The effect was immediate and shocking. The creature's aggressive posture collapsed like a house of cards. Its tentacles stopped writhing, its electrical discharges faded to nothing, and the massive biomechanical horror slowly lowered itself to the floor. The ancient eye that had witnessed the death of countless worlds now looked at an 8-year-old human girl with something that might have been recognition deep within Korath's distributed consciousness. Neural pathways that had been dormant for millennia began to activate. The Vorthok creators had built their ultimate weapon with hidden protocols, behavioral inhibitors designed to recognize their chosen successors. The genetic markers they had been searching for weren't found in any alien species they had encountered. They were found in humanity. The living weapon that had terrorized the galaxy had finally found its true masters. The silence that followed Saw Young's command was more shocking than any explosion. Throughout the new dawn, the sounds of battle simply stopped. Wu Jinhan's voice crackled over the intercom, filled with disbelief. "All units stand down. The bioforms they're retreating. I repeat, the hostiles are withdrawing from all decks." In the storage bay, Saw Young sat cross-legged on the metal floor. Her small hand resting on what she had discovered was surprisingly warm. Almost furry skin beneath the creature's biomechanical armor. The massive eye watched her with an expression that seemed almost puppy-like in its eagerness to please. "You're not really scary, are you?" she whispered. "You're just doing what you were told to do, like Bada when he had to guard the house." The creature's response was a low, harmonic sound that vibrated through the ship's hull. It wasn't the terrifying psychic scream that had driven entire crews insane. Instead, it sounded almost like purring. A deep rumble of contentment that made Saw Young smile. Dr. Junho Park was the first to find them. He had been searching frantically when the fighting stopped, following the emergency tracker and his daughter's bracelet. What he found defied every scientific principle he had ever learned. "Saw Young," he called out, then froze when he saw the scene before him. His 8-year-old daughter was sitting peacefully beside a portion of the galaxy's most feared weapon, and the creature was responding to her touch like a friendly pet. "Appa, look," So-young said excitedly. "It's not mean at all. It was just confused and scared. Like when we found Bada in the storm, remember?" Junho approached slowly, his xenobiologist training warring with his father's instincts. The creature's bio readings on his scanner were unlike anything he had ever seen. The aggressive pheromones that had made it so terrifying were completely gone, replaced by chemical signatures that his equipment could only classify as ... happiness. Dr. Yunji arrived moments later, followed by Captain Dong Han and half the ship's senior staff. They all stood in stunned silence as So-young demonstrated her newfound bond with the creature. "Stay," she said gently, and the massive biomechanical horror remained perfectly still. "Good boy. Now, can you move back a little? You're taking up too much space." The creature actually seemed to understand. Its bulk shifted backward, careful not to damage any more of the ship's systems. The massive eye never left So-young's face, watching her with the devoted attention of a loyal pet. "This is impossible," breathed Chief Science Officer Haijin Choi. "The creature was programmed for destruction. How can a child simply turn it off?" Junho was scanning the creature with every sensor he had. "The biomechanical integration is more sophisticated than we thought. Look at these neural pathway readings. It's not just a weapon, it's a living being with emotional responses." Dr. Yunji was studying her tablet, cross-referencing the data with the ancient Vorthok texts they had recovered from destroyed worlds. The creators didn't just build a weapon, they built a guardian. Listen to this translation. "The Great Protector shall know its true family by the voice of innocence and the touch of trust." Captain Dong Han shook his head in amazement. "You're telling me this thing has been looking for us? For humans specifically?" "Not humans exactly." Yunji continued reading. The Vorthok referred to a prime species template, beings who shared their genetic markers and behavioral patterns. They were preparing for their own extinction by creating protectors for their successors. So-young looked up from petting the creature. "He's not an it, Auntie. He has feelings. He was lonely for a really long time. That's why he was so angry." As if responding to her words, the creature emitted another harmonic sound. This time, it was answered by similar sounds from throughout the ship. The smaller bioforms were communicating with their parent, and the tone was completely different. From their earlier aggressive calls, the entire swarm is responding to her, reported Lieutenant Minesio Kim from the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving similar reports from observation posts across the sector. Korath has stopped its advance toward Earth. It's just floating there, waiting." News of the miraculous bonding spread through the ship like wildfire. Families emerged from the emergency shelters to see the impossible sight of their most feared enemy sitting peacefully beside a human child. Within hours, the story had spread to every human colony and military outpost in the galaxy. Admiral Taewoo's flagship, which had been preparing for a suicidal last stand at Earth, received the transmission. With complete disbelief, "You're telling me that a third grader just defeated the most powerful weapon in known space by telling it to sit?" "Affirmative, sir," Captain Dong Han replied. "The creature has shown complete docility. It's responding to basic commands and appears to have formed an emotional attachment to the child." Throughout the galaxy, alien species that had fled in terror from Korath's approach now watched in amazement as humanity's greatest threat became their greatest protector. The biomechanical horror that had consumed entire civilizations now waited patiently for a little girl to tell it what to do. So-young yawned, suddenly tired from the day's excitement. "I think he needs a name," she said, still stroking the creatures. "Warm hide, how about, buddy?" "That's what I always wanted to call a really big dog," creature that had once been known as Korath, terror of the void, destroyer of worlds, purred softly at its new name. The research station Harmony floated like a jewel against the backdrop of New Korea's blue-green surface. 6 months had passed since So-young's miraculous bonding with the creature, now known as Buddy, and the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have imagined. So-young now celebrated across known space as the first speaker walked through. the station's biohabitat with the confidence of someone who had grown up surrounded by wonders. The massive dome contained an artificial ocean where Buddy swam in lazy circles, his 3-kilometer length gracefully moving through the specially designed environment. His bioluminescent patterns pulsed in soft blues and greens, creating an underwater light show that mesmerized visitors from across the galaxy. "Good morning, Buddy," Soyoung said, pressing her palm against the habitat's transparent wall. The massive creature immediately swam over, his enormous eye focusing on her with obvious affection. The harmonic sound he made in response caused the entire station to vibrate gently, like a massive cat purring. Dr. Junho Park watched his daughter from the observation deck, still amazed by the bond they shared. His research team had discovered that Buddy's biomechanical systems were far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The creature wasn't just alive, it was a living library containing the genetic memories of countless civilizations. "The neural mapping is complete," reported Dr. Yoonji Park, studying the holographic display that showed Buddy's brain activity. "The creature has been cataloging every species it encountered, storing their genetic patterns and cultural information. It wasn't destroying civilizations randomly, it was searching for the ones that matched the Vorthok template. Around them, scientists from dozens of species worked together to understand the implications. The Zephyrians with their crystal-like bodies, the plant-like Verdani, and even the energy beings called the Lumina had all sent their best researchers to study the phenomenon." Dr. Park called out Chief Researcher Veltar, a tall Zephyrian, whose body chimed like wind chimes when he moved. "We're receiving confirmation from the Outer Rim. Another bioconstruct has awakened near the Andromeda border. The local human colony reports it's responding to their children just like Buddy responded to Soyoung." The news sent excitement through the research team. Over the past months, similar awakenings had occurred throughout the galaxy. Ancient bioconstructs that had been dormant for millennia were stirring to life, drawn by humanity's expanding presence in space. Each one was different. Some were massive like Buddy. Others were smaller, but equally intelligent. And all of them shared the same recognition protocols. Sol Young had become the teacher for a new generation of children known as speakers. These were human kids who showed a natural ability to communicate with the bioconstructs, forming bonds that transcended language and species. Currently, 12-year-old Taman Jung was working with a serpentine bioconstruct called Dancer, while 9-year-old Haewon Kim had bonded with a crystalline entity that could manipulate gravity. "The children make it look so easy," marveled Captain Dong Hai-yoon, who had been promoted to station commander. "They just walk up to these ancient weapons and start talking to them like they're pets." "That's because they don't see weapons," So-young explained, overhearing the conversation. "They see friends who've been lonely for a long time. When you're not afraid, they're not afraid either." The observation deck's main screen activated, showing a transmission from the Galactic Council chambers. Representatives from hundreds of species had gathered to hear Dr. Junho's latest report on the bioconstruct phenomenon. "Honored delegates," Junho began, his voice carrying across the galaxy. "We now understand that the Vorthok Empire didn't just create weapons of mass destruction. They created guardians for their chosen successors. The bioconstructs were designed to awaken when they encountered a species that shared specific genetic and behavioral markers with their creators." The alien delegates listened in fascination. As he explained the discovery, Vorthok had been master bioengineers who had foreseen their own extinction. Rather than leave their technology to be misused, they had created living protectors that would only respond to species worthy of their legacy. The humans call them guardians, transmitted Elder Crix of the Mantid Collective, his insectoid form. Clicking with approval. "But we have observed something more. These bioconstructs are teaching human children, sharing knowledge, preparing them for something greater." Soyoung smiled as she watched the broadcast. She knew exactly what the bioconstructs were preparing humanity for. Through her bond with Buddy, she had seen glimpses of the Vorthok's ultimate plan. The ancient empire had been working on something called the Great Project, a way to link all intelligent species in the galaxy. Through a network of bioconstructs that would prevent war and promote understanding. "Buddy showed them," Soyoung whispered. To her companion, The massive creature's bioluminescent patterns suddenly changed, displaying complex mathematical equations and star maps that appeared in the water around him. Other bioconstructs throughout the galaxy began transmitting similar patterns, creating a vast network of communication that spanned entire star systems. "They're not just guardians," Soyoung announced to the assembled delegates. "They're teachers." The Vorthok wanted to create a galaxy where all species could work together, where wars would be impossible because everyone would understand each other. Young Tamanjung stepped forward with his serpentine companion coiled around his shoulders. "Dancer says there are more of them sleeping in the dark spaces between stars. Hundreds of them, waiting for the right time to wake up." The implications were staggering. If the bioconstructs could truly link all species in a network of understanding, it would mean the end of interstellar conflict. No more wars over resources, no more fear of the unknown, no more destruction of entire civilizations, as the new dawn prepared for its final journey to humanity's new homeworld. Saul Young stood in the observation deck watching the stars. Buddy's massive form moved gracefully through the biohabitat, his patterns pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Around them, other children worked with their bioconstruct companions, learning secrets that would reshape the galaxy. "We're going to make the universe a better place, aren't we, Buddy?" Saw Young said softly. The harmonic response that filled the station seemed to come from every bioconstruct in the galaxy. A chorus of ancient voices welcoming humanity into their cosmic family. The terror that had once threatened to destroy everything had become the Kolmasiger, and a foundation for a new age of peace and understanding. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most powerful force wasn't technology or weaponry. Well, the simple trust between a child and their faithful companion. And in that trust, the future of all sapient life had found its greatest hope. The end.